and connecting you to your political representatives to talk about the challenges and the prospects and opportunities that do lie ahead. Well, we've got a short 1 hour format to get through, so I'll go through some very brief housekeeping before we make an official start. So to let you know, today's webinar is being recorded and we'll share a link with you after the event. You're welcome to revisit the content, share it with your colleagues. That would be wonderful. Probably for best view, I would suggest if you could set your view to gallery mode if you haven't already, and that can be found in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Just a reminder to stay on mute when you're not speaking so we don't get that horrible noise referral that we can find, and be respectful of the speakers and each other so we can have that really constructive and open discussion. We've already had some great feedback from you on the key issues in your region and some specific questions that you want us to hone in on today, which is fantastic. We've shared this with our speakers and we'll open up the Q&A session later with these. At that time, feel free to use the raise hand function, and that's in your Zoom, and you'll be invited to join the discussion, or you can pop a question in the chat box as well. So today we have 4 speakers with us. We've got Shaun de Bruyn, Chief Executive of TiCSA, Gina Norman, RAA General Manager Travel and Distribution, Fraser Ellis, Member for Narungga, and the Honourable Zoe Bettison, Shadow Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment. A warm welcome to you all. I will also mention that we've got Charles Mountain on the call today. So Charles is RAA Senior Manager, Safety and Infrastructure, and he can lean into the conversation, particularly around the strong connection between roads and infrastructure and tourism, should it come up. So with that, and to get properly started, I'll introduce our first speaker, Shaun de Bruyn, CEO of TiCSA, and he's a familiar face to you all, no doubt. Shaun has deep and varied tourism and business experience across relationship management, business planning, destination experience. Sorry, I have not got, my screen's gone. Okay, it's okay, back on again. So please join us in welcoming Shaun.
Thanks very much, Paula. I'll put my stopwatch on because I've got 3 minutes, I believe. So it's great to be doing this partnership activity with RAA. We're really grateful to Gina and Paula and many others behind the scenes there for this opportunity. Really, the thing that I want to take you through is 2 things in the next 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Firstly is our tourism barometer. So that's our quarterly business survey, and the graphic there tells the story of where business activity and business confidence is at. It's the 2nd worst quarter we have seen in our 12 years as an organisation, only bettered by the 1st quarter of COVID, the impacts of COVID and bushfires. So, and that represents the quarter October, November, December, late last year. So we know that many tourism businesses have found it incredibly hard with the last 2 years. We also know that some businesses have done incredibly good during this period as well. And the comments we get is that one of those regions that has done well is the Yorke Peninsula through COVID. But it is important, obviously, at a state level to recognise that there is a lot of challenges out there for many businesses. Just go to the next slide. So this breaks it down by visitor type. So you can see they're segmented into 4 different types, so business conventions, business travel, festivals and events, and holiday and leisure. And the green represents a decline, purple is status quo, and grey is an increase. And so you can see there as well that there's 370 businesses that reported their level of activity during the period. There's many challenges out there. In the 1 minute I've got left, I want to quickly just talk about the 5 pillars for our advocacy leading into the state election. The number 1 thing the industry wants to see a future state government invest in is tourism marketing. So investment in SATC to actually be able to go out there and tell the South Australian story, drive demand to our state, which ultimately then goes into businesses and creates jobs, is the number 1 priority for our industry. Restart and reinvestment is incredibly important for those businesses that potentially have lost staff, may have taken on more debt than they've had in a long time, may have pulled down their infrastructure, to be able to reinvest and re-establish those markets, international markets and interstate markets. They need some support from government to do that. They need a hand up to help with that investment. So there's more to unpack there, but conscious of keeping to my time limit. So thanks very much, Paula. Back to you.
Thanks, Shaun, and thanks for keeping to time. Your presentation obviously is very telling of what the deep impacts the industry is feeling, but what's really incredible to hear is the support that TiCSA obviously offers the tourism industry. So that's really fabulous. I would now like to welcome our next speaker, Gina Norman, RAA General Manager Travel and Distribution. Gina has more than 20 years experience in tourism, customer service and retail industries. And she's a strong advocate for the industry and committed to the viability and growth of the sector. So with that, welcome to you, Gina.
Thanks, Paula, and thanks, Shaun, for your presentation as well. Welcome, everybody. Some of the people here today will know and be working with RAA through the travel side of our business currently. And many of you may be surprised to know that RAA Travel is one of the longest running agencies in the state, which we've been around for more than 60 years, helping and supporting tourism operators just like yourselves. We really recognise the last 2 years have been incredibly tough for the industry. And today is about giving you the opportunity to ask your local politicians about what supports there are for tourism in your region and what the pathway to recovery looks like for your business. And with the announcement this week that international borders will soon be opening, we're certainly moving in the right direction. At RAA, we want to see the tourism industry return to the vibrant and growing sector that it is known for being. That's why we've partnered with TiCSA to amplify our voice and support tourism businesses and operators like yourselves to grow the visitor economy in South Australia. To be travel ready, we need to make it easy and safe for people to travel around South Australia. Despite COVID-19, strong intrastate travel has meant some regions have experienced strong activity. However, this has revealed certain infrastructure problems in regional SA. That's why when the government introduced the Local Government Infrastructure Partnership Program, we welcomed it. Now we want it to continue. We want to see the next state government commit to an ongoing regional tourism grant program to support upgrades to town centres and local infrastructure, and we need safe and reliable transport routes to and from the regions. That's why we welcome this week's announcement of the duplication of the Augusta Highway between Copper Coast Overpass and Loch Hill. However, RAA is continuing to call for the full duplication of the Augusta Highway. We're also calling for a 4-year road maintenance fund with a minimum value of $600 million to be put towards transparent road maintenance funding and improve road safety. As well, in the Narungga electorate, we want to see the installation of additional overtaking lanes along the Copper Coast Highway. And as Paula mentioned, Charles Mountain is on the call if you have any questions related to this. Improving access via infrastructure is just one piece of the puzzle. Updating, repairing and extending visitor signage is a priority across all regions, as is improvements to visitor infrastructure and improved rest areas and facilities. So lastly, we know the key to the recovery of the tourism sector is a skilled workforce. And with the reopening of the international borders, the challenge will be scaling up a skilled workforce in the time needed to meet demand. In an RAA survey, operators identified recruiting and retaining staff as the #1 barrier to growing the business currently. Lack of international workers, along with job security, housing supply issues, adequate training and upskilling are just some of the issues driving the growing capacity constraints. It's clear that issues driving skill shortages are multifaceted and they require a whole of government response. We are calling for a state strategy with specific regional tourism employment plans to respond to growing skill shortages and to rebuild operator capacity. This is vital so that the sector can be more sustainable and resilient into the future. I know it has been and continues to be extremely tough for you as tourism operators. What has shone through is the incredible resilience of the industry and those working in it. And I really look forward to working with you and supporting you to help grow the visitor economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina. I think we would all agree that, you know, we're certainly ready to move from COVID ready to travel ready, and opening of the borders, international borders, is the push start that we need for that. So next I would like to welcome our next speaker, and that's Fraser Ellis, and member for Narungga. Fraser was elected as the member for Narungga in 2018, and prior to that, a regional journalist at the York Peninsula Times. Fraser is passionate about improving the lives of people living across the Narungga electorate, and tourism is a strong focus for him. I'll now hand over to Fraser to talk through the importance of tourism in the region. Over to you, Fraser.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's wonderful to see some familiar faces up there on the screen tuning in today. It's wonderful to, I should pardon me, say thank you to TiCSA for putting on this forum. Tourism is a real passion of mine, and those from this area might have noted my independent thinking about mining on the YP. That's only because I believe that tourism has such a tremendous potential to grow. We could make up the slack and the jobs that would be lost in that mining with tourism ventures. So it's been wonderful to try and advocate as best I can for tourism across the YP in the 4 years that I've been in the job. I have to say, over the last couple of years, it seems to me, having talked to a number of tourism providers on the peninsula, that it's been a period of incredible lows and incredible highs. I recall vividly Easter 2 years ago, when we were desperately asking people from Adelaide not to come to the peninsula for fear of bringing the virus down here with them. And then the winter after that was an incredible winter with visitation like we've not seen before in a winter period. And now, more recently, we've gone through another difficult time with the reintroduction of density requirements and whatnot. So hopefully there's another period of significant lucrativity coming, another lucrative period coming, pardon me. So I'd like to say thank you all for coming. It's been a really wonderful experience going about for the tourism industry. Going forward, one of my priorities will be seeking increased funding for YP tourism. I reckon there's a real opportunity for them to consolidate the work that we've done attracting new visitors to the YP and try and make sure that they're repeat visitors and not one-time visitors. By increasing their budget, they'll be able to market themselves better across the state and in interstate tourism conventions. And they might also be able to put on, I know Brooke's done in the past, some hospitality courses for prospective people to work in the industry, because I know the staff shortage is a significant issue. So increased funding for YP tourism will be a focus of mine going forward. And as a final note, and I may well be going over time, it's wonderful to see the Port Wakefield development taking place and starting to come together. When that's all said and done, I'm sure it'll be a far easier trip for those people that wanted to visit the YP to get here safely and more quickly. So along with that, we need some increased signage at Port Wakefield to advertise, make sure those people turn left and don't keep going straight. So thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to the Q&A session.
That's great. Thanks so much, Fraser, and you definitely kept to time, so well done on that one. Our next speaker is the Honourable Zoe Bettison, Shadow Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment. Zoe was elected to the South Australian Parliament as the member for Ramsay in 2012. Born in Whyalla, Zoe worked for an iconic Australian tourism operator and was Director of Public Affairs for an organisation before entering interstate politics. Zoe believes that increased international trade and tourism will bring more jobs and opportunities to South Australians. Please join me in welcoming Zoe. You're on mute, Zoe.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to TiCSA for this opportunity. I recognise my colleague, Fraser Ellis, and I'm delighted to be talking about his area. From a personal point of view, I spent many summers in Black Point with my grandparents. That was probably prior to the updated houses now, where we had a very much the long drop toilet and the shower in a bucket. But we absolutely have fantastic childhood memories. I was spending many hours on the beach there with my grandparents. Look, when I think about this summer, it's certainly not the summer that we hoped for. And what I've heard from lots of people in the tourism industry is incredibly increased uncertainty. We have a lot of demand for last minute cancellations. There's been a lot less day trips than we expected. Many people have said to me that they had a very busy Christmas and New Year and then a very quiet period after that. What they have seen is increased self-drive and caravan and camping. And I guess as others have touched upon, actually York Peninsula, through this 2 years, which has been an incredibly difficult 2 years, there has been some positive outcomes because of your close connection to Adelaide. South Australians have rediscovered their backyard. When I've talked to accommodation providers, many of them are having fantastic booking yields and rates, and people are really enjoying the York Peninsula. One of the challenges for us will be to continue to have South Australians looking into their own backyard, but not just them, but to invite interstate people and overseas when that border opens up, as we've heard. Now, people say, what's Labor been doing during this time? And what we've tried to do is provide great advocacy for the sector. And I'm very proud that we called for tourism vouchers in June of 2020. As the government has now announced round 7 and 8, we know that that was the right thing for us to call for. And not just for accommodation, but for those experiences as well. Because it's really those tourism operators that I've heard from who have really suffered, particularly when they would usually have interstate or overseas tourists that would use their product. The one thing that we have also called for is when there are restrictions, is immediate support and automatic triggers. For one of the things we did in our COVID plan, Labor called for the government to have cash payments available to eligible businesses between $100 and $500 per day when those density restrictions are greater than 50% capacity. We also called for accommodation support payments where bed nights have been cancelled. What we've seen is a real delay when business support has come from the government. They've kind of checked the wind, how bad is it? Oh, what should we do? Oh, here's the package. What people need here is certainty. We know so many other businesses have actually flourished during COVID, and yet tourism, hospitality, retail and arts have really suffered. Now, often people are asking me, what are we going to do as Labor? And we will be announcing our policy in the near future. Building back will be our focus, marketing SA as a destination, event support, and of course, business development. But look, it's going to be a lot harder because of the cuts to the tourism budget. You can see behind me, I've got a flyer about tourism equals jobs. And I launched this brand in late 2018 after the budget was cut 11 million. And then in the next budget, another $12 million cut. And we're going to see this over the next 4 years. The budget will be continuously cut by this Liberal government. That's going to make it much harder for us to market South Australia as a destination.
Thanks so much, Zoe, for your presentation and rounding up what has been a great series of speakers today. And thanks to all the speakers here today. But now we're going to move on to the Q&A session, and we want to open things up to hear from you and hear your questions. You can certainly submit your questions that you might have using, as I mentioned before, the raise hand function or through the Zoom chat. And we certainly welcome that. But to kickstart, we've got Christina Belperio, Policy and Programs Manager at TiCSA, and she'll take us through the Q&A. So over to you, Christina.
Thanks, Paula, and thanks, Zoe and Fraser, for joining us this afternoon. It's a great opportunity for the local tourism operators to really pick your brains about what are those big policy issues and opportunities, not just for the state, but for the York Peninsula. And we have had quite a number of questions submitted in advance, which is wonderful, but so we can get through them all in the time we've got allocated. I am going to put you on notice to keep your answers to 2 minutes, and I won't be afraid to use an emoji if I need to shut you down, so it keeps you to task. But please do, everyone, pop your questions in the chat for our politicians and for RAA and for TiCSA as well. So we've heard from both of you around your priorities so far. And I guess one of the really big themes that came out of the questions in advance was around staffing. So I think I'm going to start with that topic: workforce attraction, training and retaining staff on the Yorke Peninsula. And, you know, really, what do you see? It's such a big problem, but what are some of your ideas about how the region can address these challenges and attract the right staff to the region over the next little while? I'll throw to you first, Fraser.
Hey, Christina, and it is a big challenge. When I visit a lot of pubs in regional or in Narungga, they're often telling me that it's difficult to find people to work the bar and staff the dining room. So it is a big challenge. And as I've said, I know that Waipi Tourism have run hospitality training courses in the past. I think with an increased budget, they might well be able to run more of those courses and attract people from school into those courses with the aim to keep them in the region and using the expertise that they have, funnel them into jobs that desperately need them. So I think that's an opportunity. We have just opened the Coast Uni Hub, which will be an opportunity to keep more people in our region, more young kids in our region, so they can study at Kadina at the TAFE campus, stay home and over the weekend work in their local tourism or hospitality business and hopefully help staff them that way. But I think for me, it all boils down to keeping kids in our regions, keeping kids on the peninsula so that we can access them and continue to use them as a staffing resource.
Great, thanks, Fraser. Zoe, tourism equals jobs. Talk to us about your ideas, and you have to take yourself off mute. Just take yourself off mute again, Zoe.
Sorry, I launched the campaign because of the cut to the tourism budget, and it was cut by $11 million in the first year of this Liberal government. And I was shocked. I was shocked how much was cut out of it, because we have more than 40,000 South Australians prior to COVID being involved in this industry. Now, in the regions, we've seen quite a few gaps, whether it be agricultural workers or within tourism and hospitality. So I think one of the things we need to do is, A, encourage people to see the livability of the regions, but also I'm keen to look at more collaboration. When I was talking to people up at Murray Bridge about Bridgeport Hotel, they were talking about doing some collaborations between some of the larger companies and sharing staff between the companies. I mean, we know that we have very big summers in Yorke Peninsula and it's much quieter during winter. So how is it that we can keep people employed throughout the year? The other thing I think we need is a bit of a call to action to our young South Australians, many who haven't been able to do a traditional gap year where they might go overseas. They should do their gap year in South Australia. They should experience what we have in our own backyard, and we support them with training and opportunities. They may also decide to stay. And it's great news about the Uni Hub. I grew up in a country town of 3,500 people. I went away to uni and I didn't come back. And I know that if you can keep young children or young adults there and still developing their skills and education, they are more likely to stay in the region. But we've got some work to do, and Shaun and I have talked about this a lot. We have to inspire a new generation of people to work within tourism. If you like people, you can't get a better industry. But how do we make it more reliable and more attractive? These are the challenges.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zoe. And I might get Shaun to talk a little bit about what we've been hearing across our members and what we're advocating for in terms of business capability and workforce attraction.
Great, thanks, Christina. It's a really interesting one, isn't it? The skills. We know that at the moment, potentially, there's a lot of jobs have been lost, and there's but we also know that those jobs are going to come back quickly, and we're going to go and accelerate into positive growth once we do get into recovery. Really, what we're hearing from industry is distilled into three areas, and it's careers. So it's about tourism being a desirable career. At the moment, it's not as desirable as it should be. year 10s, 11s and 12s, and their parents don't necessarily see tourism and hospitality as something that they can make a career of. So we really got some work to do to unpick what tourism is, because it's not it's not just making coffees at the corner cafe. It's so broad, it's so vast, it's such an exciting industry to be involved in, and we need to make young people understand that and their parents understand that through the education system. And the second piece is skills, and the government at the moment has obviously got a very strong focus around skills, particularly apprenticeships and traineeships, and there's some good work that's going on in there. The federal government's looking at visa exemptions, which provide support for chefs and things like that. But the challenge there is that most tourism, 95% of tourism businesses are SMEs, and most of those SMEs don't engage with traineeship and apprenticeship systems. So the skills focus that's in place in the government at the moment is admirable, but the majority of tourism businesses aren't engaged in it, which is about the third piece, which is, and Fraser highlighted, and I think Zoe's highlighted as well, it's this capability piece. It's what your Peninsula Tourism has obviously been doing, is to see a gap and build some capability. So it's not necessarily about accredited training or those sorts of traditional sort of skills outcomes. It's actually about a small business has a gap, maybe they need some work on their digital platforms. They can give up 2 to 4 hours to go attend a workshop. And I see Michelle Baines on the screen there as well. I know Michelle previously talked about cleaners, like we need cleaners in the sector, and we need people to understand how to be professional and how to do that. And at the end of the day, it's not about going off and doing a traineeship or apprenticeship. It's about having that capability with the people that can then be deployed into those businesses or are currently in those businesses that can then take that forward straight away and deploy it in the business. So it's really careers, skills, and this capability piece, which is short, sharp workshops in region with the businesses at the coalface.
Thanks, Shaun. And Gina, I know obviously, as you mentioned, RAA is also advocating around workforce and skills in this coming election. And, we're getting questions around how we can continue, and comments around continuing to employ local people. Any information that you can give us from an RAA perspective about experience development locally and what role the RAA can play would be great too.
Yeah, absolutely. We are really proud of our experiences and the unique offerings that we have. And with development of experience, we see an immense demand for all-inclusive experiences. So I believe for operators to collaborate together to come up with experiences, cover the accommodation piece and cover some sort of food and wine or nature or cultural experiences of working together, and really consider having a summer and a winter option, that you do have that year-round experience development and offering, because it also gives you the opportunity to keep your staff year-round, which gives them that security of employment. You've then got to make it incredibly easy to book and manage for yourselves. So you get the distribution, you get the income, but it's the easy management in that sort of development of the experience. RAA, we have a platform where you have the opportunity to be part of it, and you can load your products, and you then aren't sort of having to do the management of it. We do the management of it with regards to bookings, and it doesn't cost you to join, it doesn't cost you to manage it. You're only paying it on a commissionable product, which is only then when you're getting the bookings as well. And the other piece for us is really making sure that we advocate to make our region safe and accessible to travel. So we actually help people get to the regions to enjoy the experiences. But I do believe the build out the offer to make it a complete offer, and it's a fully inclusive experience in the region, which is what we're seeing the demand for.
Great, thanks, Gina. And just a reminder, if you do have any specific questions, please pop them in the chat there, and we can get you on to ask those questions. One of the other key areas we've got lots of questions in advance about, and has been commented on already, is around driving demand. And certainly at TiCSA, we've been hearing this across all of our members across the region, the importance of marketing and other activities to stimulate travel and visitors to the region. So with that in mind, you know, you've both, Zoe and Fraser, you've talked a bit about regional marketing, but what do you see is the real opportunity for getting both locals to the Yorke Peninsula, but also attracting those interstate and when we get them back again, the overseas visitors to the region? Or maybe this time, Zoe, you could go first.
Well, look, I think for many of us, we remember the Yorke Peninsula as a place you go and relax, particularly over the summer holidays. But we know now that there's some really interesting things to do, to go to Sunny Hill Distillery and try their beautiful tastings. Be careful of the pink gin, it's a bit of a killer. And I think you also had the brewery there as well on the Yorke. So we're providing a diversity of attractions. So there's the Barley Stacks Winery. I also sought out one time the alpaca farm and really enjoyed that. And I know they used to get quite a few international tourists. So I think we have to say, well, naturally there's always the beauty of Yorke Peninsula and the beauty of the relaxed time there. There's also activation and different product for you to come and try. Look, I have advocated quite strongly about supporting regional marketing at a point when it was going to be cut. That decision was reversed and an agreement was struck. But I think that we can work more strongly with our regional areas. I think you have great stories to tell. I also think that there's an opportunity. I saw in the Barossa where they have a trail that people can buy into, and it takes people to more diverse places throughout that whole region, with a very big focus on some of the food production that's around in the Barossa. So I heard Gina talk about being more collaborative about those experiences. I think people tend to go back to what they already know. So for me, another place is the ice cream place just outside of Moonta. We think that beautiful homemade ice cream is fabulous. We always go there. But, you know, what else should I be trying when I'm there as well? So I think we have to keep sharing the diversity, and we probably need to lead people, not just encourage them to come, but to say, here's 5 things you should do when you're in Yorke Peninsula.
Great, thanks, Zoe. Fraser.
Well, for mine, Christina, it starts with a recalibration of the bias at Tourism SA. You'll forgive me for being blunt, but I don't even run a tourism business, and I'm sick to death of watching a Tourism SA ad pop up, and we cycle through from Mount Gambier, the southeast, we go to KI, the Barossa, and then over the west coast. And it feels like the YP is rarely ever featured on the statewide advertising. And we outperform visitor numbers every year. People still visit the YP, but we can't seem to have a significant presence on the statewide advertising. So if we were able to be a featured piece like we deserve to be, in my view, and we start getting recognised for what we actually do have here, and we can start to attract a few more people, and we can start to provide a few more experiences for people when they get here, and we can continue to grow and evolve. But for mine, it all starts with a reconfiguration of the bias at Tourism SA to make sure we're a featured destination.
Absolutely. You're not seen and heard, don't exist, right?
Can I just ask Christina a question not on notice?
Yeah.
Zoe, if you are the tourism minister in 5.5 weeks' time, do you have a position on funding for regional tourism organisations?
Well, look, my biggest challenge will be the cuts to the tourism budget that are built into the budget going forward. I mean, this is really intense. Let me just remind people how deep these cuts are. So in 2021, there's $96 million. And then in 24-25, it's 72 million. We are going backwards because what's built into this Liberal budget. So I would like to sit here today and say I can reverse it all, and that would be a struggle for me. But you can be reassured that we'll have a significant focus on marketing destinations in South Australia. We need to build back. But my job is made a lot harder because of these cuts that are in the budget.
You'll put the YP at the top of the poll for us, though, if you want.
I'm sorry.
You've still got the mic be at the top of the pile for us if you want, mate, even with the little amount you've got.
Well, as you know, that I have spent quite a bit of time in the Yorke Peninsula. I think it's something that's particularly unique and special. The government has put a lot of investment into the Port Wakefield overpass. The accessibility is quite high. I think the time is right for us to focus on the area.
I'm sure that's what our listeners are keen to hear. And it was remiss of me to let you know that on the line we actually have Yorke Peninsula Tourism Chair Craig Costello and your outgoing Regional Tourism Manager, but Guru of all things tourism for the YP, Brooke Liebelt, on the line. And given this talk about regional marketing and driving demand for the region, Brooke or Craig, I'd be really interested to throw to you and get your perspectives on what you think the priorities are around marketing for the region. And I've also got a specific question that I think would be good for you guys, which is that someone wrote in saying they wanted to see this collaboration around advertising between businesses and the regions to drive experiences, which we've sort of touched on, and I'd be really keen to get your perspectives on that and how Yorke Peninsula Tourism could be a part of that and lead it.
Yeah, hi, how are we all going? How are you, Christina? Thank you for giving us an opportunity to have something to say. I certainly think marketing going forward is going to be extremely important for Yorke Peninsula. We've done incredibly well during the COVID period. Certainly some businesses have performed better than others. You know, hospitality certainly would be an area that especially during the summer period, would have liked to have had less restrictions than what they had to endure with reduced capacities and so forth. But overall, certainly our region's been performing very well, being that sort of hour and a half, 2 hours from Adelaide. But I think marketing going forward is going to be important as the borders and international travel opens up. Encouraging people to continue to come back now they've discovered Yorke Peninsula is going to become vital, which links into Fraser's comments. You know, there's no doubt, you know, since my time as chair, that Yorke Peninsula hasn't had an equal showing or representation through the statewide marketing campaigns that are put out there, whether it be a statewide basis or interstate or international. We don't seem to be, it's either, you know, Barossa or Kangaroo Island or, you know, there's probably 3 or 4 regions that get the lion's share. And so I, like Fraser, would like to see Yorke Peninsula get its share of the marketing in that area. But also too, I guess, would like to see, you know, with grant funding, I'd like to see that with Yorke Peninsula has a lot of the small to medium businesses, and I think would benefit from grant programs that allowed for much smaller investments. It might be smaller upgrades to rooms. It might be a smaller grant to start a fishing charter or to start a bike hire business or a kayak hire business, but just sort of lower those barriers instead of, you know, one big corporate company getting $500,000. Why not give 50 small businesses or startups $10,000 each to make a real difference? So I think that sort of thing would be very beneficial for Yorke Peninsula. And then I guess local infrastructure is something that is on our radar, whether it be our popular jetties, which are scattered along the coastline. They're certainly a very important attraction to us, and ensuring that they're maintained and kept to a high standard. And perhaps a centrepiece icon, you know, what that might be, I'm not sure, but I guess you draw example from, you know, Whyala's jetty that they've just done, their circular jetty. Not saying we copy their idea, but some sort of attraction that that people want to come and see, and just draws them to continue to come and visit and stay 3 nights instead of 2, is something that we would like to advocate for. And I guess, you know, in closing, staffing, certainly concur with all the comments, staffing, and it's probably disproportionate as you go throughout the peninsula. Certainly I would say the southern half of the peninsula has a much greater staffing issue than the upper sections of Yorke Peninsula. So I think, you that needs to be recognised as well, that it's not, that issue's certainly worse in certain areas than it is in others. So I think they're probably, from a Yorke Peninsula tourism perspective, that would be where we're at and where our priorities would rest.
Right. Thanks, Craig. And you've hit on a few good topics and issues there, which we'll come back to, particularly around business support and also infrastructure. But I'd just like to wrap up with a couple more questions around the driving demand. I've had Anne Minion has popped a comment/question to me in the chat, which is really about when it comes to marketing of the YP, when new businesses are emerging, and the fact that the timing to get into the publications and other marketing materials for the region, there's quite a time lag. So if she, in her case, Anne says she's missed out on the most recent publication, and it's a 12 to 18 month lag before she can get her business up into those publications as well. So I don't know, Fraser, if you've got any commentary around that timing, and obviously there's a funding attached to how that can all work.
Could you repeat that just quickly for me, Christine? We're having technical issues, not least of which the camera seems to be continually zooming in on me, which must be good for everyone else that's watching. But...
Yes, it's around the fact, the infrequency of when the publications are updated for the YP, and if a new business comes along and they've missed getting into the brochures and the glossies, that there's a 12 to 18 month lag to get new businesses showcased through those marketing materials.
Well, I will have to take the balance of that question on notice. I do know that there is a new magazine that is in the process of being established, which will be titled Yorks, and that'll be a twice yearly magazine that will do its best to advocate the Yorke Peninsula to the wider population across the state. So that when it's up and running, and I believe it's not too far away, will be at least a twice yearly opportunity to promote new businesses. But and there's of course, and I mean, the declaration of a slight conflict, there's of course the weekly paper, which is still circulating quite strongly, which provides a weekly option to advertise, but I won't promote that too heavily.
And maybe Christina, Gina might have a view on some of that as well, because I know obviously some of that's about the trade distribution system and things like that. Gina, do you have a view on that question? You're on mute.
On mute, Gina.
There we go. I knew it'd catch me at some stage during it. I was so conscious I was mute. From a trade distribution perspective, it's something that we can certainly help with because it's actually having access quickly to distribution. And if you're waiting on a publication and you know that you've missed it and you've got a new business or whatever, the digital distribution piece is so important. That's where we can help, and there's certainly other providers that can help in the online space. And we can also help with advice on getting businesses online ready and how that would work. And there's courses as well in that online distribution of understanding it from the marketing side and also the actual bookings and management side. And in that way we can get places up and running far more quickly, and then exposure, certainly from our perspective, we can have exposure to all of our members. We have 780,000 members, but in any kind of digital environment, you have access again to the world potentially.
Great.
Christina, do you mind if I just add something to that one as well?
Absolutely, Craig.
I was just going to add, so we look after the Yorke Peninsula Tourism Guide, and probably it used to be done on an annual basis, but what happened was thousands of guides would get produced, and so many would end up out at the tip or in the recycling recycling centre, and they're of course all paid for, so advertisers are paying for them. So we made the decision a while ago that we would reduce the quantity slightly, but we would run the guides through until they were used up, which meant that the publication probably lasts around 18 months. But the advertisers that put in their investment are getting a longer duration, and every guide that they effectively are contributing to have printed is being utilised and not ending up in the scrap heap. So that's the reason for it. But there are other ways that Anne could get involved earlier, like she could certainly contact YPT and we could organise some advertising on the Yorke Peninsula website immediately and then have her ready to go in our next guide. But yeah, certainly, like I think Brooks put here, if she reaches out to us, we'd love to talk to her about some options.
Great, thanks, Craig. And yes, Anne, in the chat there's Brooks' number, and anyone else who wants to talk to YP Tourism about marketing and advertising, please do reach out to them. They are your regional resource. I've got one more question around driving demand, which is for you, Gina, and sort of taking things up to the international level. You obviously mentioned, and we're all aware of the fact that there's now the borders reopening, and really it's, you know, what do you see as what this means for tourism operators?
Well, firstly, I'm sure everyone's incredibly excited that the possibility of international tourists coming back to our shores and coming to see our fabulous unique offerings is so important for tourism and business development in all measures. And we know that those three essential elements are required. We need to have those unique offerings. We need to have great staff to deliver those experiences to people, and we need to have that increased investment in the state and region marketing to take it to the world and ignite that demand. We also need planes to be full in both directions, which often when we're looking at inbound tourism, we don't think enough about. If we don't have outbound tourism, the planes won't be full on the way out and we don't attract the airlines. So it's so important for us in South Australia. We know South Australians who've been saying for 2 years, right, well, once I can go overseas, I will go somewhere. We know that they will go somewhere, and that's okay. We need to have offerings for them for their South Australian holiday each year, and whether that's a 3-night or a 5-night or a 7-night, we need to have offerings and the PR associated with how important it is to include that each year. But we need to have these planes all going out and coming in and work with both government and Adelaide Airport in attracting airlines back into South Australia, because the direct flights are the most popular. And it makes sure that we can attract sort of inbound and outbound tourism, that we get the perfect balance to grow both.
Thanks, Gina. I am conscious of time and I really want to move on to some great questions we got, which is really about business restart and reinvestment and how we can get businesses going again coming through COVID. And Zoe and Fraser, we heard it from Craig, but we've also had questions in advance as well about the fact that operators aren't eligible for a lot of the most recent support. And TiCSA, you know, we're advocating not for just emergency support payments, but it's more about how do we get businesses going again, given they have eroded their cash flow and their cash reserves and they've gone into more debt or sold off assets. But how do we make sure, especially some of those smaller businesses, are eligible for the support, and what type of support do you see if you were to come into government that you would love to see for the tourism industry?
Thanks, Christina. Look, when it came out, the Tourism Investment Development Fund, I know it was quite widely welcomed, but I did have some criticisms about it, because you needed to have about $70,000 cash on hand ready to invest. And for a lot of our tourism operators and providers, they're small to medium enterprises. And for a lot that I'd spoken to, they'd really used all their cash flow and sold off assets, particularly in that first part of COVID. So they simply couldn't access that development fund. I think that there is probably capacity for us to do funds at a lower level, or to have more diversity in what those funds can go for. Whether it's furnishings upgrade or upgrading in the website. Recently, we've announced our nature tourism grants, And within that, it covers training of new staff for nature tourism, which is obviously goes to that skills area, but more the fact that people need flexibility in what their business needs right now to build back. And so I think when, if I'm so fortunate to have the opportunity to be the Minister for Tourism for South Australia, I would like to do a review on the development fund and where that went and who was successful. And there were some areas in your peninsula, the Wallaroo Beachfront Tourism Park got some money, and Sunny Hill, Redwing Farm and Yonder Beach House. So there are a few areas that did receive that funding, but a lot of people missed out because they just weren't eligible, nor did they have the capacity to actually participate.
Great, thanks, Zoe. Fraser.
Reasonably boring debate when you agree with the other person, but I think Zoe's bang on. The threshold was far too high, and although she's listed those that were lucky enough to get on the YP, there is scope for more take up, and we can lower that threshold and open it up to more businesses with perhaps a smaller turnover. But completely agree with Zoe on that front. The other thing I'd add is I think there's continued opportunity for event funding. We can continue to have things like the field days and the Colonel at Lawenda, and there's a seafood on Spencer event coming up, which I hope will be a wonderful addition to the calendar, and we can continue to host wonderful events here on the YP. As you've identified already with our geographic closeness to the city, we can have a lot of people visit and really bring some new money into the region. So agree with Zoe in that, yeah, I think there's scope for events.
Absolutely. I hear a good collaboration coming on if Labor's to get into power for the YP. I'll just put the last call out. If anyone had any more questions, please pop them in the chat. But Zoe and Fraser, another question, well, we've had a couple of different questions around seeding new businesses and whether you've given any thought to how new business opportunities could be supported if you're in government, and you know, these are small micro businesses, startups, and there was also a specific question around supporting Aboriginal experience startups as well, and whether there's potential for any funding for those types of businesses.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly, I think, the next step in our tourism offerings. We continue to attract people here, and we continue to provide more and more for them to do. And I know particularly there's a shortage of dining experiences, so that we can provide more food options for people when they're down here. That would be a tremendous addition. I personally am of the view that we do need to be wary that we're not sabotaging existing businesses if we're going to provide too significant a seed money or too significant a startup initiative. So it's really important that we don't forget the existing businesses that are the ones that are here doing the hard yards now. But by all means, I think the next step in our tourism progression, in addition to attracting people, is making sure that they've got something to do while they're here.
Thank you, Zoe.
Well, obviously they should probably join TiCSA and get some very good mentoring. I guess one of the things I've been incredibly impressed with over the last few years is the modules of training that TiCSA has offered, and it's been quite diverse. So it's been around marketing, making self-COVID safe, attracting new employees, I guess working on your business. We know many people are working in their business all the time, but to give useful, short ways of upskilling people in their business. Look, I come from a family who owned a small business. We had good years and bad years. It was 24/7. So I really admire anyone who wants to set up their own enterprise and grow it. Ultimately, they'll employ South Australians. What I would like to see is a lot of our micro businesses go to small businesses, go to medium businesses. And I think that people need mentoring for that, to see what that looks like, whether it's that HR component about getting the right skills around there. I think that's what we can do. But I've always had a personal interest in both Indigenous tourism, and I have a really, I guess, an interest in agri-tourism. and not everyone shares my view, but I think people are interested in knowing what it's like to be a farmer on the Yorke Peninsula. They're interested in going out with someone who is a professional, does professional fishing, for example, to walk in their shoes, to see what it's like firsthand. I think there's some unique experiences that the Yorke Peninsula could certainly offer people based on the depth of what they live and breathe every day. So agri-tourism for me is people seeing how things actually are growing. That paddock to plate thing that we've seen has developed over time, but take it back even further to see how that produces. So I'm a very big supporter of people starting up businesses. We used to have business support centres, I think mostly funded through the Commonwealth. I think this is something for us to consider as we build back here in South Australia.
Right, thanks Zoe. And we are almost out of time. So before I throw back to Paula though, given you gave the opening, I'm just going to let Shaun make a comment, given you talked up our business development programs. Shaun?
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, we're absolutely passionate about that capability space. We know that going out and doing 2 to 4 hour workshops in region with businesses on topics that are relevant to their business at that time gets great engagement. Businesses are prepared to invest in it as well. We'd very much like to see whoever the state government is moving forward to make a greater contribution to that program so we can do more, because it is about that enterprise level, it is about that SME level, and it is about those tangible things that people can take away from a workshop and immediately put into their business to be more financially sustainable and more successful. Thanks, Christina.
No worries. And thank you all for your contribution, including Craig from YP Tourism. And Paula, I'll hand back to you to wrap up.
Thanks, Christina. And thanks everyone for your participation in today's event. Your commitment is truly remarkable, and your contribution, what you do for all of us in the state, we all thank you for that. So this concludes the formalities of the day, and it was really important to hear from you why tourism really matters for your region and for the state as a whole. Our speakers are happy to take on any further questions, so we'll be sharing their contact details along with a short survey following this, and any feedback we'd be very happy to receive. So thank you all once again, and have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Good. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.